Hello, so Halloween is just around the corner, and as we all know, Halloween is not for parties or trick-or-treating or any of that nonsense. It's for reading scary novels, and lots of them. So today I want to recommend to you 3 of my favourite vampire novels. Now, when I was a teenager, I read a certain trilogy of books about vampires. I'm not going to recommend Twilight, nor am I going to recommend any of the hundreds of books that sort of vampire obsession we had a few years ago spawned. I'm going to be recommending some older books and talking about where vampires originated from. So vampires have been talked about in literature as long ago as the 18th century. In particular, they became popularised by the romantic poets like Byron and Shelley. They just loved the vampire stuff, you know, hanging out in graveyards and dark stormy nights and all that stuff. The first vampire novel was called The Vampire, and it was published by Polidori in 1819. But what I want to talk about is one that was published a bit later but is a whole lot more better known. This is Bram Stoker's Dracula. I have the Oxford World's Classics edition. This was first published in 1897, and Bram Stoker was an Irish author, and this is his best known work for obvious reasons. Bram Stoker defined the vampire as we know it. Count Dracula is an icon, has left this cultural legacy behind, and anything you think you know about vampires probably came from this little book. I'm sure I don't need to say anything about this book, but the Count Dracula is this mysterious pale man who lives in the hills of Transylvania, and this is an epistolary novel, which is one of my favourite things about it. Each character sort of writes letters to one another, they're all connected, and there's some newspaper clippings and various things that get put in there. It's really interesting because it creates a story from a lot of different perspectives, but it also sort of keeps information from you because all these characters don't know what's going on and you kind of do. And oh, I love this book so much. I think my favourite thing about this novel is that it's born out of the gothic horror genre, and it's absolutely terrifying. It's genuinely scary, and vampires, I think, are supposed to be very seductive, and I think Twilight and co, they sort of somewhat captured that, but they should also be absolutely horrifically terrifying. They should shake you to your core, and Dracula does. There are lots of things going on in this novel. There's gothicism, horror, sexuality, ideas about race, but you can ignore all that if you choose to and just read it as a fantastic book, because that's what it is. So if you haven't read Dracula, go and read it this Halloween, and there's loads of movie versions. So which movie of Dracula is the best one? I have been assured that the 1992 version of Dracula with Gary Oldman, or Sirius Black as we know him, is the best. So watch that movie version and read this book. Huzzah! The next book I want to talk about isn't actually a book, it's a short story called Carmilla. It was first published in 1872 in this collection of short stories called In a Glass Darkly by Sheridan Le Fanu. Le Fanu was also an Irish author, and if you want to think about why Irish authors were so concerned with vampires, then that's a really interesting topic, and I'll talk to you about it in the comments, and I'm going to start ranting. Oh Jesus. This has a lot of similarities with Dracula. The plot focuses around these young, beautiful, quite wealthy women. In particular, the narrator is called Laura. She's a teenager and she lives with her father in a castle, and one day this carriage overturns and this young mysterious woman gets quite injured and has to stay with them. This young woman is called Carmilla, and Laura soon realises that she met Carmilla in a dream when she was a child, and they both just talk about this. Remember that time we met in a dream? Yeah, that was fun. This is so tense, it's actually hard to read in places, and again, it really captures that seduction of vampires, and it's particularly interesting in this because it's between 2 women. I love this short story, firstly because Carmilla is a woman, and secondly because there's so much suspense throughout, and then at the end you get this whopper kind of dun 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 revelation, and I just really love it. It's so short, and this book, actually, I adore this collection. There's some really creepy horror gothic stories in there, but there's also a couple of quite funny ones. So yes, read this if you like supernatural gothic short stories. Good. Finally, I want to talk about a much more modern vampire novel. This is I Am Legend by Richard Matheson. We've all heard of it because there was a movie with Will Smith, which I have not seen, so I won't recommend it, but I can recommend this book. This book is quite short. It was published in 1954, and it's very interesting because it was published at a time where ideas of zombies and zombie apocalypses were really taking off. But the villains in this book are actually vampires, but they kind of behave more like zombies. So it's very interesting. Basically, it's about Robert Neville, who's in Los Angeles, and he thinks he's the last man alive because everybody has been swiped out in this virus and they've all become vampires and they're all trying to eat him. So he's alone in his house. He's a very interesting protagonist because he's depressed and he drinks too much because there's no one left, as you would be, and he gets very violent in the way he deals with these creatures. So he's at home researching a cure for this affliction so that things can get back to normal. I really like the focused narration of this. It's quite short. I love the idea of it. I love the setting. Sometimes it's a bit slow, which is really weird for such a short book, but I really wanted to include it in case you're not into the sort of gothic things go bump in the night genre. This is a lot more modern. It's set in America and it's a little more realistic, some might say. This is categorized as a science fiction / horror novel, but it's one of those ones that I don't really feel the need to categorize. I just read it and I really enjoyed it, and I hope to reread it soon, and maybe one day I'll watch the movie, but I probably won't. Those are all my recommendations. I hope they were useful for some Halloween reading. Let me know if you've read any of them and what you thought, and you keep your neck covered and keep that garlic nearby.
Want garlic bread for dinner?
Do I want garlic bread for dinner? I don't think you're supposed to eat it, I think you're supposed to wear it.
Alright.
And as it's Halloween, even though I hate Halloween, let me know what the scariest book you've ever read is, because I'm really bad at reading genuinely scary books and I'm trying to get better at that. So let me know, we'll have a nice chat and I will see you very soon. Goodbye!